Hey everyone, Jin here. So after having a chance to sit down and think about all the things that we were shown in the points of interest for the Berserker, I wanted to revisit all of my impressions that I had originally made after reading the blog post and the ZAM article. So this is going to be just my updated impressions and opinions on the stuff we're getting with our Elite Spec and how it fits in with what we have and things I'm happy with, not happy with, etc, etc. So with that, I'm going to jump in and do them in the order of how I originally did the impressions, not how they revealed them on the points of interest stream. So it'll go Berserker and Primal skills, followed by the Torch, followed by the Rage skills, followed by the traits. Alright, so Berserk itself, my opinion hasn't really changed on it. I like the idea, I like what they're doing with the fact that it flips over your F1, it gives you a completely different set of burst skills. I like the fact that it locks you into it and you can't manually leave it. The analogy they used on the stream I liked, it was where you get really angry, but you can't really just kind of like stop being angry. Can't take a chill pill or anything, as you said. So I like the idea behind Berserk. I like the fact that it forces us to think about when we're going to go into it and whether or not we want to trade off our normal burst skills for the new ones. It is a little disappointing that there's no real drawback to it other than the opportunity cost, but I think maybe the opportunity cost by itself will be enough to be something to force us to consider whether or not we want to enter it. The duration is currently, or at least as of the build they were showing, 15 seconds, and I think that is a perfectly long amount of time for making it a true decision. Do you want to go into Berserk mode, get the attack speed boost, but lose out on all of the utility of your other burst skills, and maybe the increased single target damage or whatever of like kill shot or eviscerate, etc, etc. I think 15 seconds is good for us to try out at first. I don't know if it's the perfect amount for actually having it at live, but we will be able to test this in a beta weekend event. So having it at 15 seconds I think is a good starting point for us to see whether or not it feels like it's too long or too short or whatever to capture that opportunity cost feel and make it a true decision of whether we want to go into it or not. I'm not really going to talk much about the cooldown of it because it's shorter than duration. You will have it available whenever you exit it, yada yada. The only time it'll really factor in is if you proc a certain trait that involves you dying in Berserk mode, or you just straight up die and maybe use a waypoint. It's not really a big deal. As long as it's equal to or below the duration of Berserk mode, the cooldown is fine. Alright, now for the Primal burst skills. For anyone who listened to my initial reaction to these, I was kind of happy with their general idea, but I wasn't happy with the fact that they didn't really go outside the box with them. I didn't really like the fact that they didn't do anything super crazy. Well, after seeing them in action and seeing all of the things that they are capable of, I've kind of warmed up to them. I've kind of gotten what they're going for. I like a lot of the things they do with some of them. A couple of the burst skills I'm not happy with still. There are a few things about them that I'm not too keen on, but overall I do like what they've done. I do like some of the things they've added into them. They all look really cool. I like that aspect of them. The damage numbers I'm not really going to focus on, but the functionality is what I'm going to look at for most of these, and overall I do like them, but I will go into each one. Okay, so for the Sword Primal Burst skill starting off, I like the functionality of it. I like how it looks. I like the fact that it is several projectiles. I like the fact that it's basically our version of Guardian Sword 3. I've always liked how that skill works, where it breaks projectiles that come at you and you can still throw projectiles back at them. It pierces. It has a pretty good range on it. According to this, it's 900. So I'm happy with that aspect of it. I think it'll be nice for, say, some counterplay. If, say, a longbow ranger is throwing a bunch of rapid fire shots at you, you can pop this to throw fireballs back at them and also destroy those rapid fire shots. I like that aspect of it. However, the offensive aspect of it, I feel, suffers from the same thing that normal flurry does, where you don't really use it for the damage, you don't use it for the conditions, you use it for its other effects. In the case of normal flurry, it's the immobilize, and you typically immobilize and then skill cancel it. This, I don't really see people necessarily skill canceling it a lot, but the fact that the burning is still such a short duration, I don't know how much people are actually going to want to use this. Yes, it is burning. Yes, the amount of damage you can get out of a burning stack, even for 1 second, is a lot more. But I still feel like the duration of it is too short to really feel useful. I'm going to need to test this one before I can really say whether or not it's too good, too bad. And of course, they are tuning everything. So whether or not it ends up being this way, that could all change. But just from what I see here, I definitely see this being used more defensively. I see this being used more as a countermeasure to ranged pressure and projectiles than I do see popping it to throw a bunch of fireballs at people. Don't get me wrong, it's badass, it's cool, but I'm concerned about the offensive capability of it. It seems to suffer from what normal Fury suffers from. Alright, moving on to the Great Sword's Primal Burst skill, Arcane Seer. This one I'm not sure how I feel about it. The fact that it does give you a fire field is pretty cool. The fact that it applies a lot of burning, the fact that it is an outward expanding ring that will apply multiple stacks of burning if people run through them. I like that. That's some cool play with it. It gives us access to more fire combo fields other than just the longbow and the torch, which we'll talk about later. I like the idea behind it, but I don't know how practical this thing is going to be. I could see this being used in, say, some Greatsword hybrid Connie power builds, but I don't really see this being taken in a pure Connie build purely for the fact that it's Greatsword. Greatsword is very much built around power builds. This seems very aimed at hybrid builds or for people who really want the fire field aspect of it, and I almost feel like you would rather just use normal Arcing Slice if you're taking a Greatsword, because you're going to want to use that mainly for the execution aspect of it. This still has execution mechanics in it. It's basically Arcing Slice but with fire and a combo field on it. I don't know how practical this is going to be without testing it myself. I can see some cool implications where you are, say, a Burning Warrior and you have a lot of stuff where you set up combo finishers on yourself, because this does have 2 combo finishers on the weapon. It has Blade Trail and it has Whirlwind Attack, but even still, I don't know how practical that's going to be. I need to test this. I need to figure out how useful this is in various game modes. I do have some thoughts on this when I talk about how Berserker is going to fit into our builds in PvE. I'll talk about that later, but for now, I'm just going to say I like some aspects of it, but I'm on the fence about others. I'm not sure how I feel about it overall. Alright, next up is the Longbow Primal Burst skill. This is Scorched Earth. I talked about this one before when we got the initial information. I like everything it's got here. I like the fact that it is a skill shot thing. It goes for a long distance. However, the one thing that confuses me is why is it a series of small circles and not just the rectangular field like they've got on the Ellie and the Revenant? If you're going to do these long fields, why not be consistent and just make it that one? I was talking about this during the stream last night, and one of you guys was talking about how it was maybe there so you could do a leap finisher and get a bunch of fire shields. Well, I did some testing, and it's only 1 leap per field. You can't double up on fields with the same leap finisher. I used my thief to test if I could get stealth and weakness by dropping a poison field and then dropping a smoke field and then doing a Heartseeker through it. The Heartseeker only affected the first field. It only affected the smoke field, and it didn't do anything for me when I jumped into the poison field. I also tried it with some fire fields from some nearby Ellies, where I would drop the poison field and then do a Heartseeker out of the field into the fire field. And again, that only gave me the weakness. It didn't give me any fire shields. So it's only 1 leap finisher per field. You can't do 1 leap finisher and get, say, several fire shields by using the same finisher through multiple fire fields. That's not how it works. So I'm confused why they're going with several circles instead of 1 rectangular thing. If it's an engine thing, I guess I can understand that, but I would almost imagine they would just want to go with 1 long rectangular field and that's it. Maybe it's so you can have multiple people, multiple groups of 5 doing combos and stuff, but even still, you're going to need a lot of coordination for that. Maybe this ties in with some of the PvE stuff we're getting in Heart of Thorns. Like maybe there are fights where you want to have 5 groups of 5 or however many circles there are blast might on themselves, or you want multiple fields for different things. Maybe that factors into it, but these fields don't last very long. I just don't know where they're going with this skill. It seems like it does its job fine. I'm just confused why the fields are a series of circles and not a rectangle. Now for the Rifle Primal Burst skill. The Gun Flame skill, I'm looking forward to this one. This is one that actually got me really excited when I saw it on the stream. It looks like it'll be something that will definitely benefit hybrid builds, but I could also see this being taken in certain power builds as well, because it still does scale fairly well with power, it seems. It's not going to hit for as much as a kill shot, but the fact that now it's AoE and does some burning and does the daze, I really like that. It turns it into a bit more of a utility skill, because it has the daze on there. You can ranged interrupt people who may be winding up big skills or whatever from 1500 range. I like the fact that if you put on Crack Shot, you will have several explosions whenever it pierces. Like, it'll normally hit one target and explode there, but if you have the piercing trait, it'll explode on every target it passes through. So you just have this series of giant explosions on a whole bunch of people if you manage to line it up through people. I like that a lot. I definitely think this will benefit hybrid builds, not just because it has the burning on there, but because it has that daze. And if you take, say, something like Distracting Strikes or Body Blow or both, That means you're going to get a lot of daze, weakness, and confusion out of this thing if you use it at the right time, just because it has that daze on there. I like the fact that it synergizes with those traits more than normal kill shot does. Moving on to the Mace Primal Berserker Skull Grinder. This is one that I could actually see having some of its functionality being removed or toned down. The fact that it has baseline 4 stacks of confusion and a daze means that with this skill you can potentially get 8 stacks of confusion on someone, and with a Connie build or even a hybrid build, that's a lot of damage, that's a lot of confusion, so I could see that being removed. But either way, like, I think this is a really cool skill. I think it changes the mace into a more Connie heavy weapon, which seems to be something that they're doing a lot with a lot of these Primal Burst skills. They did mention in, I think, the interview with the Zam article that originally Berserker was very heavy Connie with all of its stuff, but they toned that back a little bit. Even still, right now Mace is either used for the interrupt or the disable, I should say, or it's used in Connie builds but purely just for, say, body blow and distracting strikes. This will just give it some baseline Connie pressure. This will give us a lot of condition application. This will give us a lot of cover Connies that we can use in our Connie and hybrid builds. It is a blast finisher too, so that means it'll synergize better with our fire fields, give us even more Connies through burning. It'll let us synergize with others through, say, water fields or fire fields or whatever. This will give us kind of just an emergency, hey, we need a blast finisher right now, pop this on whatever the field that we need it on is, and we'll be good to go. I like the fact that it has that aspect to it. It gives it more synergy. Alright, next up is Rupturing Smash. This is the primal version of Earthshaker. This is probably my favorite of all the ones they showed us, and it's not just because I like running hammer. Just the idea behind it and how it changes the burst skill. I feel this is the closest to what they were kind of going for with the Primal Burst skills, where it was same theme, different function. Rupturing Smash, instead of us getting an AoE stun, we get an AoE displacement. And I really like this because it maintains the same theme of Earthshaker, but instead of it being a stun where it keeps people in place, this gives us another displacement skill. We don't really have a lot of things that we can displace people with normally. We have Staggering Blow on the hammer, we have sometimes Stomp, we have Rampage's Kick, but we don't have a whole lot of displacement things that we can use on people. This gives us another tool to displace people with. This allows us to push people away. If, say, someone is downed on a point, an enemy is down on a point, and someone's going to res them, you can drop this on them and push not only the person who's resing away, but also the body away. This will help give us a bit more zone control. This will help us manage where people are a bit better. I really like it a lot. It is still a blast finisher. It still seems to do a fair amount of damage. Now, there is an idea that struck me after seeing all of these displacement things that we're getting on the Revenant, on all the elite specs and whatnot. It seems a little odd that they would just put all this displacement stuff on skills and whatnot just for PvP. I think there are probably a lot of things in the Heart of Thorns content in PvE that we need to be displacing. Say, the challenging group content stuff. Who knows? There might be some boss fights or something where a bunch of ads come in that we need to keep pushed away, or something like that. Either way, I like this as a skill. I like the displacement. I like the fact that it gives us more tools and different tools that we can pull out when we need them. Finally, for Decapitate, the Primal Burst version of Eviscerate for the axe. Basically what they've done is they've reduced the single target damage of Eviscerate, but made all of the targets behind your Eviscerate target take half of that damage. It's a cool idea, but I'm just trying to think of how practical this will be in any situation. I think if they added maybe, say, the projectile reflect or projectile destruction thing on the shockwave you get out of it, that would probably help this skill a bit more. It would give it a bit more counterplay, say. But just having it do damage, but in an AoE, I think it's neat, but I need to test this one. This is another one I need to really get my hands on and try out. It still seems like it does respectable damage, but I'm very unsure of how I feel about Decapitate. Alright, so those are all the Primal Burst skills. I like how they look. I like what they're kind of going for with the themes and whatnot. Overall, as far as what builds I see these benefiting, I see these primarily benefiting hybrid builds or Connie builds. Some of them, like the Earthshaker Primal version and Killshot Primal version and maybe the Eviscerate Primal version, I can see all those benefiting power builds. But overwhelmingly, it seems like they are very hybrid or Connie oriented. With how strong burning is, I could see them still being used in power builds, but I think these are very heavily aimed at Sinister or Carrion or Rabbit or any number of hybrid builds or Connie builds to get the most out of them, as opposed to just running them with power and getting that extra tick of burning. Alright, so jumping over to the Torch skills. So first off, we got Blazebreaker, the number 4. My opinion has improved on this. I thought it was basically just going to be Tremor with conditions, but this actually works a little bit different. It's a shorter range, but it does have the multi-strike mechanic that they've been messing around with, and I like that. This will be nice for clearing blind because you get several hits, so the first hit will clear that blind, and then you have all the other hits go off. It does seem to stack a fair amount of burning, especially on things with larger hitboxes, say world bosses, or if you have a whole bunch of people in one spot. This will be very nice for applying a lot of burning, a lot of Connie pressure. It seems like it scales fairly decently with power as well, so I could see this benefiting hybrid builds. Overall, Blazebreaker, I like it. I think it's pretty neat. My opinion of it has improved since I originally got the description of it from the article and blog post. Alright, now for the other torch skill, Flames of War. I like the idea behind it. I like the fact that it has a heavy Connie component to it, as well as a bit of a power component to it with the explosion. I like the fact that it's a mobile fire field. I just like the skill's design overall. I think it's really neat. Those things being said, I do have 2 issues with this skill. I don't like the fact that there's no buff icon showing while it's up and when the explosion is going to happen, and etc, etc. Like Zealot's Flame for the Guardian, which is very similar to this, has an icon. You can tell when it's happening, you can tell when it's going to expire and whatnot. This doesn't, and I don't like that. Not just because as the warrior you can't tell how long there is until the explosion, but also for the opponent's sake. I like there being counterplay to some of these things, and when that buff isn't there, it's kind of hard to tell when it's going to time out. I mean, yes, the fire field is a pretty good indication of when it's up and whatnot, but even still, I think it would benefit from having that buff icon shown so you could tell when the explosion is going to happen as both the warrior and as the opponent, and it gives that counterplay to it. It allows the warrior to position themselves in a good spot for when the explosion is about to happen. It gives the opponent a good way of telling, hey, that explosion is going to come, it's time to get out of the way or dodge or whatever. I just think it would benefit from having that clarity with the buff. The other thing I don't like about this is purely subjective, purely visual and whatnot, but that explosion looks really weak. The explosion is just kind of a puff of flame when it goes off. If you're gonna have it explode, make it do more visually. I mean, yeah, I know particle effects are crazy in this game and whatnot, but come on, if you're gonna make something an explosion, make it an explosion, not just a little puff of flame. But anyway, overall, I like the Flames of War skill. I really like the functionality of it. My opinion hasn't really changed on it, and seeing it in action was really cool. Now for the torch overall, I think the torch, yes, definitely benefits Connie builds, as kind of a lot of us figured it would, because it is torch, and torch on a lot of other classes is Connie oriented. But it does seem like they tried to make these skills have more of a power component to it as well, so that maybe the hybrid builds want to take this as well and get that power burning combination going, and it wouldn't be just a Connie weapon, it would be a Connie hybrid weapon. I like that. I like the fact that this is more hybrid focused, and the fact that it fits the theme of Warrior. They did talk about this as well, where it fits the Warrior theme of just hitting things with the torch or with whatever we've got, and having that power component definitely helps keep that theme and gives the weapon a bit more flexibility as far as what builds it fits into and where it can be used. Alright, so next up is the Rage skills, our brand new utility type. These I am kind of half and half on after seeing them in action, seeing what they all do. Some of them I am really hyped for, some of them I am a little disappointed in, some of them I don't know how I feel about them. Okay, so starting off with Blood Reckoning, that's our heal. They basically gave us Litany of Wrath with a slightly different flavor. I'm fine with getting Litany of Wrath because it fits our theme of going in and doing damage. It's not like the original situation where we got Defiant Stance, which is kind of not what our thing is about. It's something that Guardian should have gotten. But anyway, that's personal opinion. As far as what Blood Reckoning does, this is what I'm going to have to mess around with. It does definitely fit the theme of Berserker, where you do the damage and you get bonus damage for, say, critting and whatnot. But I don't know how well this is going to work in practice. I need to get my hands on this because it does not give you a base heal. It is purely damage to healing. There is no flat amount that you get for using it. So things like blind and block are really going to hamper this. It lasts for 6 seconds, so there's a decent amount of time to use it, but this is one I'm very on the fence about. I need to see how this works on my own before I can really get an idea behind how viable it'll be. It could end up in a situation like Defiant Stance where it just doesn't do enough for what it is. It does have a short cooldown, relatively speaking. It does only have a 20-second cooldown, so that may offset this, but I don't know how it's going to work until I try it out. Alright, next up, Wild Blow. I am still just as hyped for this thing as I was when they initially talked about it in the article on the blog. I'm looking forward to this thing. This looks really handy. This ties into what I was talking about with the displacement stuff with the hammer Primal Burst skill. It gives us another tool for displacement. The fact that it is a very high base damage skill, has a decent cooldown, and always crits. Like, there's a lot of stuff to like about the skill. 30-second cooldown is pretty decent amount of time to have this thing up. It's faster than, say, Pulse Charge or anything like that. The only problem I have with it, this is either just an engine thing or because it's still being fine-tuned and whatnot, the way the hitbox and the knockback works with your target after you throw them looks kind of weird. Like, there's this buffer zone of where it knocks people back. I'm not sure how this will work. I think this might just be a tuning thing, but it looks weird when you hit people. It's probably an engine thing, whatever. It doesn't really take away from my hype for the skill. This looks like a very powerful skill. This looks like a very useful skill. I could definitely see warriors slotting this for, say, team fights or in maybe World v World or something like that, punting people off cliffs. The fact that it is 100% crit chance does mean you can proc things guaranteed off of your sigils and whatnot if you know they're off of their internal cooldown, so it's just a nice tool to have. I really like this skill. Alright, the next one, Shattering Blow. This is another one I'm actually really excited for. The Condi application part of it is nice. It'll be nice for, say, Condi builds that are using it and whatnot. It has a very short cooldown, has only 15-second cooldown, so that's nice. The thing that gets me the most hyped for this skill, though, is the fact that you can reflect projectiles. And what it actually does, you punch a rock, and that shockwave from punching the rock reflects those projectiles, so you can essentially punch back projectiles. That is thematically really cool as far as I'm concerned. I am really excited for that, but looking at it from a more practical point of view, giving us that projectile reflect shockwave that doesn't last very long, but it goes out very quickly, that gives us a very good tool for counterplay against ranged pressure. Like, for example, let's say there is a ranger firing a point-blank shot at you and it's going to punch you back. If you can react fast enough, if you can see the tail fast enough, and you use this skill, you can actually reflect that point-blank shot back at them and then punt the ranger back and then interrupt them that way. Another example would be, say, with a mortar shot from an Engi. You could punt that back at them if you time this right, and just the fact that it's very timing based, but it's such a powerful effect when you use it. I like that. It adds depth, it adds complexity, it adds flavor to our abilities, and allows us to bring tools to certain situations that allow us to deal with those situations better. If we have a lot of range pressure, we are able to deal with that range pressure a lot better with this skill than we would without it. This will also definitely benefit builds that have Shield Master equipped, where you get reflects on blocks, because if you have, say, a mace shield, something sword build that has Shield Master and then you also take Shattering Blow, you suddenly have a lot of projectile reflect capability, and that's going to be very nice to have for those situations where you have a lot of range pressure. I really like Shattering Blow. Even if it was just the projectile reflect and maybe a little bit of damage, I would still be happy, but the fact that it also gives adrenaline and the bleeding, that's just icing on top of the cake. Now, for the next raid skill, I'm not really happy with it. Sundering Leap does not look that good to me. Yes, 10 seconds of vulnerability is pretty nice. It lasts for 8 seconds, that's 10% extra damage, that's pretty cool. The cooldown is fairly respectable, and the fact that it's a lead finisher is also pretty nice, and it is an AoE. But this looks like just a not as useful version of Bull Charge to me. This looks like something I would rather take another skill over, and I don't really have any interest in using. Yeah, using it for a gap closer is nice, but compared to all of our other utilities and what we have on our weapon skills for gap closers, I just don't really see a use for this. I can see this being taken care of with other skill combinations, and overall it just seems very underwhelming. Until I get my hands on it, I'm not a fan of Sundering Leap. This will probably need some tuning before release. Alright, now Outrage, the fourth utility rage skill. This is another one where I'm on the fence. This is just like with the healing one. I am very on the fence about this. A 10-second Sunbreak is very powerful, don't get me wrong. 10-second Sunbreak is nice, but the trade-off for that is you don't really get any other effects, you just get the extra adrenaline. I really don't know how this is going to work out, because our other stun breaks, like, say, Balance Stance, Dolyak Signet, those have pretty decent cooldowns, but they also give you other effects. Same goes for Shake It Off. Shake It Off has a 24-second cooldown or so, but it also clears conditions. I don't know how worth it is to give up those secondary effects just so you can have a 10-second cooldown. this is one that I have to get my hands on and try out before I can really formulate a proper opinion on it. It's cool in some aspects, but I'm worried about it in others. I, right now, would almost rather take balance stance and get the stability out of it than just have a 10-second stun break. I don't know. I'm going to have to give this some testing. I'm going to have to get my hands on this before I can really formulate a proper opinion of it, how it feels. And finally, Headbutt. This is one I'm excited for, and from a practical standpoint, I definitely see people taking this. I definitely see this being used by a lot of warriors, regardless of the build, because this does a lot of really nice things. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to surpass our other elites, I don't think, because there are things that Rampage, Signature Rage, and Warbanner will do that this cannot hope to match, but at the same time, this fits a niche that none of those other ones do that is very powerful and gives us a very nice tool. It is a stun breaker when you use it. It gives you full adrenaline, it does a bunch of damage, and it's a 3-second stun. This is like a combination of a whole bunch of other skills all rolled into one nice thing, and it's all on a 20-second cooldown. I like that. I really like that. The fact that it stuns yourself and it has a short range, that's a perfectly fine trade-off for all of the other stuff it gives. Like, this is a very powerful thing as far as I can see. Now, the thing that they were talking about where you use, say, Outrage to break the self-stun, I don't agree with that strategy at all. That does not sound like a good thing to do. Like, a 1-second stun, you can wait that out. If your opponent is stunned for 3 seconds, you're fine to wait that out. Or, what I would personally do, they did talk about this on the stream as well, is pop something like Balance Stance or Doliac Signet, give yourself stability, and then use this, and then just eat the stack of stability. I'd rather do that than pop this and then waste Outrage just to break that 1-second stun. To me, that's not really worth. But anyway, that's personal conjecture. Overall, I really like Headbutt. I think this will definitely be something that we'll use in the iteration they showed us. It does a lot of really cool things, and it definitely fits that elite slot theme as well, because it's just really nice. Alright, and finally for the traits for the elite spec. Overall, I think these are pretty neat for some of them. Some of them are kind of not so great, but I'll talk about each of them as I go through. For the miners, the first one is Primal Rage. This is the one that gives us access to, you know, torches and rage skills, blah, 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 blah. I think it was in the words of Wooden Potatoes, this is kind of a non-trait, just because it enables us to do the stuff that our elite spec was advertised to do, so it kind of just is there, and it does everything the elite spec opens up. The second minor trait, which is Always Angry, I like this one. This is akin to the Opening Strike minor trait for Rangers. It kind of gives you a whole bunch of stuff that you can play off of. I like this. It's another tool that we get. It gives us a full bar of adrenaline with our first strike when we're entering combat, and this can apply to every build. I think it's cool. I think it gives us another tool to play around with. And then the third minor trait gives us 2 seconds of quickness when we go Berserk. I think it's fine. I think it thematically fits. It's a minor trait, so you get it for free, so it's whatevs. I'm happy with it. Alright, now for the Adept major traits. So the one on top is called Smash Brawler. Killing a foe reduces the recharge of all Primal Burst skills. I think this is neat, but it is a on-kill trait, so I'm not sure how I feel about it. I can see applications for it. I can see applications where you would want to take the other 2 traits. I don't know. This basically allows you to spam your Primal Burst skills, which is a cool idea. I think it's kind of like one of the Reaper traits where it resets a bunch of your cooldowns by a certain amount of time if you kill an opponent. This is neat. It basically incentivizes killing a whole bunch of people. So like if you get in a team fight and you have a whole bunch of people low on health, you can go Berserk, go in there and kill one, run over, kill another. I could see a bunch of different applications for this. It's neat, but I don't see everyone taking it. I do see some people taking it, but not everyone. For the second one, you got Last Blaze. When you use a rage skill, set nearby foes on fire. This is definitely a condition-oriented thing. Depending on how prolific rage skills are, I'm not sure how much this trait will be taken, but who knows? Depending on how this gets tuned in the betas and whatnot, I can see this being really useful. 3 seconds of burning is pretty decent, but maybe if it was longer, it might incentivize taking the trait a bit more. That one we're going to have to wait and see on. I'm not sure how I feel about it right now. And then finally, Savage Instinct. Activating Berserk mode breaks stuns and removes conditions. I definitely see a lot of people taking this one. I almost feel like this is the one that a lot of people will go to in any PvP situation. Another stun break on Berserk and removing condition, that's really nice. The fact that you can't cancel Berserk mode might incentivize this one a little bit less, because yes, it is a stun break and condition removal, but you are then stuck in Berserk mode, and maybe that wasn't necessarily the best idea. So overall, this is probably going to be the one that people will take in a PvP situation, but like I just mentioned with the Berserk mode, it might not be the best idea. Maybe Last Blaze will be a better idea. In PvE, I could probably see either Smash Brawler or maybe Savage Instinct, depending on the mobs you're fighting in Heart of Thorns content. Last Blaze could go either way. I'm not sure on that one. For the Master, you have Blood Reaction. This is one of those conversion traits. I'm going to keep calling conversion even though Colin doesn't like that name because I don't like these traits. They're very boring. They're useful, but I just don't like what they do. They're very mundane. They don't spice gameplay up at all. They're just flat stat boosts. I don't like this trait. I can see people taking it for more damage. I can see this being something you would take in PvE for more damage, but I just don't like these traits. They're so boring. They just don't do much. I would rather see something more interesting put in there, but whatever. It's useful. It'll get taken. The next one is called Heat the Soul. This is the torch reduction skill. It gives you some condition damage. For a Master, I kind of feel like something else should be tacked on, but at the same time, I don't feel like it's underpowered with what it is. I can go either way with this. I can see builds taking it. I can see builds not taking it. I still feel like there should be something extra on there just to kind of spice it up a little bit. I mean, yeah, the theme of Warriors just kind of go in and do things and don't get too crazy with special effects, but I don't know. Heat the Soul could be cooler. And then finally, Dead or Alive, taking fatal damage while Berserk mode ends Berserk, but heals you and converts remaining adrenaline to health. This is probably going to be the one everyone takes in PvP. This is just incredibly powerful. This will keep you from dying. It is keeping you from dying. Anything that prevents death in PvP is going to be a go-to. Like, it's really strong. It's really powerful. I don't really see many builds not taking this unless they're using a torch. Even in PvE, I could potentially see this, especially like in open world, and depending on how hard mobs are in PvE or in the challenging group content or whatever, I could see this being taken there too. Just Dead or Alive seems like such a powerful trait that I don't know how much people are going to want to take the other two over this one. It's really powerful. I could see this one getting toned down a bit. And then finally, the three Grandmasters. Bloody Roar, this is one that was data mined before, and it seems to be fairly similar to the data mined version. I think it's pretty neat. I think it gives us more control options. The bleed aspect of it is pretty nice for condition builds, but I think it's mainly there for the taunt. I think Robert even talked about on the stream how it was mainly there for the taunt. I like it. It gives you the ability to control opponents. This will be really nice in team fights where you can, say, rip people off of rezzing down people or going for big hits on your allies, maybe peeling people when they're going for low health targets. This will just be a nice usage of Berserk as a different tool, giving it a different flavor and a different use in a PvP situation. In PvE, depending on the content, I could see this also being useful. Say there are a bunch of really deadly mobs that, say, they just spawned and they're running in. You need to keep them off of some of your, say, backline people or some of the people who are supporting you. This will be a nice control tool for that. In World v. World, I could see this being useful for, say, some warriors that get in the backline and disrupt the backline by taunting a bunch of the backliners. I can see this being a really nice tool for that. I think it's a pretty neat trait. I think it fits a Grandmaster. Second one, King of Fires. This is probably my favorite trait of them all, just because of how it works. This is kind of like the chill one, where if you crit someone as a Reaper, you do an AoE chill explosion. This is basically that, but with fire. And in addition to that, it also gives you a duration increase on your burning, so I definitely see condition builds taking this. You're basically spreading burning all over the place, especially if you're running, say, a rapid build or a build with a lot of precision. You can just spread burning everywhere and have that burning last longer. It's just a really cool trait. It's only got a 2-second internal cooldown, which I definitely think it does need an internal cooldown, but mechanically it's really cool. I like it. I think this will definitely benefit Connie builds and maybe even hybrid builds. I could see some hybrid builds taking this as well. And then finally, Eternal Champion. This is the one that was originally data mined as like a break bar skill. It looks like they changed it to be just pulsing stability while you're Berserk. It fits the theme either way. I can't say I'm really sad about it not being a break bar. That would have been cool, but at the same time, I'm fine with pulsing stability as well. I do like the fact that they've kind of spiced up the trait as well, where anytime you break out of a stun, you gain another stack of stability. This will actually make the Rousing Resilience trait a bit more appealing for certain stun breaks. Overall, I like this trait. I think it'll be nice for a bunch of different builds, that have a lot of stun break capability. This will help benefit the Outrage rage skill, because at least you do get that little bit of stability. So I think if you're running Outrage, you probably want to take Eternal Champion. Overall, for the traits, I think they work pretty well. I think there might be a few spots where one kind of heavily outweighs the others. I don't really have any problems with them except for Blood Reaction. Blood Reaction I just absolutely despise. I despise traits like that. Smash Brawler, I am a little concerned as to how practical it will be, but I could see usage for it. It does have a very powerful effect for what it does. So overall, I like the traits we got. I like what they do. With what they provide us, I could definitely see some interesting applications of their effects in PvE, PvP, World to World, whatever. Alright, and my final overall impressions for Berserker, where I think I'll be used, and just the benefits it gives us, and how I feel about it, yada yada yada. I definitely think the Berserker build will be taken if you want to go with a Conde build for Warrior. I definitely think it helps shore up some of our lack of condition application, our lack of condition variety. I like a lot of the things that it provides. I like the raid skills overall. I like the Primal burst skills overall. I don't think it's necessarily going to be that big of a deal for certain power builds. I can see a number of situations where warriors with power builds right now may not want to take Berserker. Like a good example is my Hamtastic build. Its current iteration goes Strength, Arms, Discipline, and I can't really give up any of those because it's heavily dependent on Signet synergy, and I would either have to get rid of the damage from Strength or the synergy from Arms to really make Berserker work, so I don't think that build would really use this, but at the same time, I do have some other builds that would definitely take Berserker. Like, for example, I have my Red Assume build where it is hybrid power Conde, and having a torch instead of the offhand sword, and having things like Skull Grinder and the displacement on the hammer will all be really nice things to have. That I could definitely see using Berserker. Basically, if it's going to be a build that's going to be oriented around conditions or is going to heavily use conditions, I think it will take Berserker. That's for PvP. For World v World, I could see it, all of the displacement stuff, I could definitely see being useful for breaking front lines, for disrupting back lines, the things like the taunt, the inability to really die while you are in Berserk mode, for at least that one death will be nice for charging into people's front lines and back lines, for disrupting, say, pirate ships and whatnot. I can see that being useful. The almost permanent stability, I could see it being useful in World v World situations for pretty much anything but a support build. Maybe like a backlining build. In PvE, in our current PvE, I actually don't think I would see many builds taking Berserker. I think the current established meta builds for, say, dungeons and speedrunning would do much better without Berserker. I could even see some builds just for like open world and whatnot not wanting to take Berserker because maybe they want the benefits of, say, defense, tactics, and discipline. I can see those builds not necessarily want to take Berserker either. On the flip side of that, I could see Berserker being taken for some of the new content in Heart of Thorns, depending on how hard it is, depending on the mechanics, depending on what we're fighting. Because, yeah, there are some very nice mechanics for controlling things, for managing where things are, and I could definitely see those mechanics, such as the taunt or the displacement on the hammer, being useful for managing adds in a fight, or things like Blazebreaker adding a lot of extra damage on large hitbox bosses and stuff like that. So, depending on the new content in Heart of Thorns, Berserker may or may not be useful for PvE builds there. But overall, I think this is definitely going to be a line that people take, but not a compulsory line. I don't think this is going to be like Warrior 2.0. I do think it's been balanced in a way where it does not benefit certain types of builds, which I think is good. I do like the fact that it forces some trade-off, or it doesn't make sense for certain builds. Like, for example, a build that is based around, say, Phalanx Strength or just tactics in general, maybe more supportive build, is probably not going to want to take Berserker just because there isn't really anything necessarily supporty in that line. It's pretty much all damage or control. And a support build isn't really going to need either of those. It's going to mainly need things like might stacking, boon duration, dealing with healing and cleansing and whatnot. So I think a support build definitely isn't going to want to take Berserker, regardless of the mode that it's in. I think builds that are very heavily power-oriented, like I mentioned before, are not really going to want to take Berserker either, because Berserker has a much higher emphasis on power and Conde, or even just Conde in general, and control. Say maybe a dueling build that is focused heavily on killing a single opponent very quickly, a power build, is not really going to want Berserker because all of the burst skills have had their damage reduced. Certain ones may want to take it for the rage skills, but at the same time, you can do a lot of what you can do with rage skills with physical skills and other things. So Overall, I definitely see people taking it, but I don't see everyone taking it. Anyway, that has been it for my revisiting of my impressions of the Berserker now that we've seen everything. I have some concerns. I'm not happy with some of the things, but overall I am still excited. I really want to get my hands on this and try it out. There's a lot of things that I'm not going to be able to get a full conclusion on until I see how it's balanced and how it feels. So I'm definitely stoked to try this thing out in the next beta weekend event. I had to do a lot of thinking on this, that's why I didn't get the video out as quickly as I would have liked, but I was super tired and I wasn't able to put out the quality of audio that I wanted at the time, so I had to go to sleep and actually think on things a little bit. I'm glad I did. I was able to give a bit deeper thought to how things were. I'm going to have to do a lot of post-processing on this because as of this moment, in the raw recording, it's about an hour, 5 minutes, so I'm going to have a grand old time editing this thing, getting rid of all of the rambling and uhs and ums and all that fun stuff. So with that, thanks for sticking through. If you listened to the entire thing, thank you very much for listening. This is almost like a podcast's worth of thoughts. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video or around the stream. Take care, everyone.